1/3-pound Angus beef patties, 4 strips of crispy bacon, and triple cheese. The only way to stop it is to eat it. Get ready to face the new Monster Angus Thick Burger from Carl's Jr. Feed your happy. Limited time only at participating Carl's Jr. restaurants. Price and participation may vary.
Race fans, it's time to buckle in and listen to the fastest hour in racing radio. Your driver is a multi-time NASCAR winner and Hall of Famer Mark Martin. We cover racing, grassroots, history, we bench race, we talk life, and most importantly, we smash the loud pedal. It's time to turn some laps on the Mark Martin Podcast.
All right, race fans, episode number 22 of the Mark Martin Podcast. We're going to focus on the year 1980 today. On today's episode, before we do that, make sure to hit the website, markmartinpod.com, to listen to all the episodes. An important thing about these podcasts over the last couple episodes, there's companion episodes to these. You want to go back and you want to listen to some of the
are going for their third win in a row.
All of the different episodes that really talk about a lot of the stories that really add a lot of flavor to what we're talking about in these episodes. So make sure to go back, markmartinpod.com, listen to some of those old episodes while you listen to these. Also, make sure to hit up at Mark Martin Pod on the social media, Mark Martin POD on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. But now it's time for the year 1980, episode number 22 here on the Mark Martin Podcast. And Mark, 1980, a massive year for your racing career.
Definitely makes the top 5 of importance and eventful, years of my career for sure. Kind of leading into this, the last podcast, I had moved up to Dillon's in North Liberty, Indiana, was running his trailer, his springs, working out of his pole barn out next to his race shop, and had a key to his shop and was able to go in at any time of night and use his equipment or whatever I needed. Hit the parts room and grab any parts that I needed, bolts or whatever.
Hitters count.
It was a really, really cool deal. There I was at 20 years old, running my own racing operation and making it work, making the dollars and cents work, and racing and living the dream. So as the year wound down in 79, Ray hit me up to let's design a better race car than what we had. I ran the Howe car again in 79, so 77, 78, 79. I built new Howe cars for each year, and they were spectacular at the time. Very, very. You could be a complete dumbass and run good with those cars. Just do what they said, and we did. And we won races, and so Ray had. I would have never done it, but Ray had the wherewithal and the ideas and the guts to build a race car, and it was going to further my career because I wasn't going to have to put the money in the parts to build the cars. Our deal was, I'll build you two race cars, 2 chassis, send them over there next door to you, and you put them together, hang the bodies and put them all together, and I'll buy all the parts to put on the car that you don't get for free. You put the engine and transmission in it, and when you're all done, take the engine transmission back out and give it back to me. So this was a big move in my career, and also I went to prototype. I was running Ray Baker engines, fantastic engines, but the engine bills were too much for my. They were tough on my budget. So I was on free tire deal, had been for a couple years with Firestone, and I really needed an engine deal. And Ron Neal at Prototype, he said later that he chickened out. I gave him the opportunity to give me free motors to run, and I'll run your decal. And he passed on it. So I stuck with Ray Baker for 1980. 1980 was the first season that I recall ever in my racing career where the hauler didn't change. That's been a big topic so far in every podcast, is the stories about the hauler. Truck and trailer, step van, all stayed the same for 1980 from 79.
The next batter is
but we designed this car. I had
Here comes the first pitch of the at-bat.
creative say-so
This guy
on
is a horse.
the
Every time he goes out there, you
chassis,
expect him
on
to give
the
7 or
on
8
the
strong innings.
suspension, suspension.
Halliday throws it over for
Ray
a strike.
certainly
It's 1-1.
was the brains and backbone of all the structural
Ramirez sends it out
part
to
of the
shallow
car.
center.
And
And a
and
run
so we
comes home.
built
That's
this
an
race car.
RBI single.
And my biggest thing was trying to figure out what spring rates were going to be right for the car. This was the first car that I was aware of that was a straight right frame rail from the front snout to the rear tail section and didn't kick out like the left side did. So the cars were lighter than anything
Pick off
that
attempt.
we'd seen, and they were, more left side weight. When there wasn't really weight rules yet, we forced them into weight rules, and we forced them into body rules in 1980. So we pretty much forced rule after rule after rule after rule with this car by being able to push the limits. And the lazy competition didn't want to do that to the race cars, so they complained to the sanctioning bodies, and the sanctioning bodies clipped your wings and put rules against it. So anytime that somebody did something and one up me on the race car, I never cried or complained. I just went and did it more. And that was the kind of competitor I was. That's why racing against Gary Ballou was so good for my career, because Gary constantly pushed me to raise my game and to go further and to think smarter and work harder and learn more. And so we came out of the box running a pair of 500s in the front and kind of settled on a 200 and a 150 in the left, 200 left rear, 150 in the right rear. The cars were heavy left side weight. Pretty easy to get 60% left side weight, which was hard as hell to do with a Howe car, if not impossible. My cars, personal cars, were 62 to 63% left side weight, but our customer cars were 60, 59 and 60. My cars were always lighter. As we went into the season, they were the car was just the heat. I mean, everywhere we went, we broke the track record. Every time we unloaded the car, we broke the track record, no matter where we went or what we did, except fast time. I saw something about out of 36 races, we set fast time. We broke the track record 33 times. Between ASA races and ARTLO races and other short track races. It was phenomenal. You had to have one of those race cars. I mean, you had to. And as the season went on, orders started coming in to Dillon for the cars. There were some customer cars that came right out of the gate, like Bob Strait. I gave them setups for the cars. That was my deal. I gave them the same setup I was running. There's no way they could outrun me with a Dillon car and the same setup that I gave them, because my cars were lighter and my cars had better bodies on them, and I knew more about what was going on at the time. So I wasn't concerned about giving out the setups. As a matter of fact, I got paid $100 cash to set a car up, and most of the customers would go home, build a car, bring it back to Dillon's, and I would scale it out and set it up. I did tons of setups in 1980 on customer cars. do the setups, so put the weight in them, and do the bump steer, line them all up and everything.
That's exactly what you saw right
so anyway, the car was absolutely spectacular. For example, Bob Seneca, for example, in ASA that particular year, they only had 15 races. And I sat on the pole, I think 11 or 12 times, I think. I won 5 races, and I ran second in 5 races of the 15. Bob Seneca won 5 races because he was so damn much smarter than I was. Guy was absolutely phenomenal and had some kind of weird stuff going on with his rear suspension that no one was ever able to figure out or copy. It was amazing. He called it the albatross, and I still don't understand what he was doing there, but he was so much smarter than I was, and a great racer, and the one that tabbed me in 1977, Captain Crunch, which really made me go to work on my racing savvy and staying out of trouble and becoming a 300 lap and 400 lap racer instead of a 25 lap racer. There was a lot of interesting things. The cars always turned so good. They were always so freaking loose. It was unbelievable. So I had to go through, and what I had found is that the more left side weight you put in the car, the looser it would be. Now, I'm not talking about loose slow. I'm talking about loose fast. If you could ever tighten it back up, it would just be blinding fast. So the cars were blinding fast, but always turning better than the back end would stick. So my setups evolved through the season, through the year. Getting the car tighter. And one of the things that I would learn, I was racing out of that pole barn with no insulation next to Dylan's shop, and living in the house there next door, the 3-bedroom house, me and my 2 employees, Banjo and David Lebendahl. And the thing that I would learn, we'd go racing in Wisconsin or Indiana, Michigan, whatever it was. On the weekend, we'd race, a couple times a weekend or something like that. And I'd notice when we'd come home, when I'd climb under the trailer, the right rear, there was a strap that went around the right rear tire that held the car on the trailer, went around the right rear and the left front. And when I would go under there to unhook the right rear strap, I would notice that the right rear spring wouldn't be touching the weight jacker. Most of the time it'd be an inch or inch and a half away. In the first few times I saw it, I didn't think that much of it. I thought that was weird, but I was running a lot of wedge. I was running 62% left side weight and trying to run 59% cross, and sometimes even I'd go to the racetrack at 59. I wanted to stop at 59, but I'd be loose and I'd put a round in here, and a round in there, and a round in here, and a round in there, and wind up the front bar with preload and take stagger out of the rear and whatnot. But it was taking me a while to figure this out. But when you would burn fuel off, when you burn the fuel off the back, the left rear spring would just lift off the right rear. So I started noticing this when I'd go under to hook that right rear strap. Noticed it a couple times. Didn't think anything of it because I had to get the car unloaded and get it washed and start working our maintenance and preparing for the next race. But I went to Winchester to test because we wanted to win the Winchester 400 really, really bad. Ray Dillon wanted that in the worst way. I don't know. It just was something that was the Daytona 500 to Ray. So we went down there and tested, and of course, the higher the bank the racetrack, the looser the car always would be. And so it's loose and it's loose. And I got the stagger down in the back. We used to run 2 inches of stagger. Now I'm down to a 1/4 inch of rear stagger. Still loose. Got the front bar wound up. Got the wedge, put wedge in it, still loose. And so I climb under the race car and just look. I just lay down on the ground and look up in there because I'm like puzzled on how I'm going to get this thing hooked. Of course, I'm blinding fast, but we got to get her tightened up, be faster. And I see the right rear spring is already off the jacker. And I'm like, well, damn. Jack this thing up. They jacked up the right side. And I took the right rear spring out. And, of course, at that time I had an 800 in the right front and 700 in the left front. And a 500 in the left rear. And a 200 in the right rear. And I went out on the racetrack. And I drove pace car speed. Everything's okay. So I speed up just a little bit more. Everything's okay. Then I pick up the speed a little bit more. Seems okay. Then I run through one turn fairly hard. It seemed okay. So then I let her eat. Well, as soon as I let her eat, the back of the car started bobbing out, dragging. And I thought, you dumbass. I got to have a 700 in the left rear because I had a 500 and a 200. It's going to take 700 pounds of spring to hold this car up. So come in, shove a 700 in the left rear, and go out. And, oh, my God. She's hooked now. And it's stupid freaking fast. So I got this thing figured out. Not only have I lightened the car up, but now, by taking the spring out. Dude, I just took more weight off this car than anywhere on it you can. I had been, I had spent days and days and days grinding on stuff, bell housings, engine blocks, transmissions, you name it, hole sawing, frame rate, just everything you can think of to lighten the car up. And in this one swoop, I've done took more weight off of it than I could take off of it in 3 days of grinding and hole sawing. So it was a win-win. So I got this deal figured out. So we go back down there for the race, and I mean, it's just ridiculous. I mean, I qualified. The track record was a 16:04. That was a track record. I ran a 15:74 qualifying, and outside pole was Bob Strait in a Dillon car with a setup that I put on it. I set the car up with no right rear spring for him too. He ran a 16:03, so he would have broke the track record himself. But I was sitting there with 3/10 on the field. And long story short, I had some tire trouble in the race, and I got down a couple laps, made them back up, and was racing to pass Mike Eddy, trying to pass Mike Eddy, which was the equivalent of trying to pass Ryan Newman in today's NASCAR. That's what it was like to try to pass the Polar Bear. He was really tough. He was racing for it. We were down to 5 to go. And I got loose underneath him and wiped us both out. Trying so hard to get the pass completed. And so neither one of us won. That was a heartbreaking blow. I've never been so embarrassed and humiliated in my entire career as I was to clean out the leader going for the win. It was devastating. Not so much the loss, but the mistake. I just couldn't forgive myself for. That race was later in the fall of the year, and I ran that race on Goodyears. But the tire story backs up a little bit. I started the season on Firestones again, all free tires, and the car was spectacular fast, but I was having increasingly challenges from Trickle, who had switched to Goodyears. Goodyear had been probably 2 years in to developing a new short track tire, different design casing and all, and they were on the money, and Triple was challenging me. I think Seneca had already switched. He was a Firestone guy, and he'd already switched, and that's probably that really hurt me the first part of the season, but I was able to still, set track records and win the race, but it was getting close, and everybody that was on a Firestone tire deal had made the switch except me, and my car was helping me, and I was being told by Johnny Summers, who was the Firestone tire rep, don't throw us in the river, kid. Don't throw us in the river. We'll remember it. And it was very important to me to get free tires. And if I switched to Goodyear now, it was too late, and I wasn't going to get a tire deal. This is what I thought anyway. I didn't ask. Probably should have asked, but I didn't. And so I grounded out all the way to Milwaukee. And we're ASA race. We're getting ready to go to Milwaukee, and I go to Arkansas to visit my dad. And I told my dad, this tire thing is killing me, and complained a little bit about the tire situation. And he handed me 8 $100 bills. At the time, the tires cost $100 a piece. He handed me 8 $100 bills. And I know what that was for. That was for tires for Milwaukee. So I leave Arkansas and I go to Milwaukee with my 8 $100 bills in my wallet. And I go check in the hotel and, do the typical thing, hang out around the bar, whatever. And I finally got a legal ID. I'm finally 21, so I get to hang out with my peers in the bars. So I go to my room and I go to bed and wake up the next morning, and I roll over and I look and I notice the door to my room is open about 6 inches. And I'm like, oh shit. And I looked up on the counter and there was my wallet, and I thought, whew, man, dodged that bullet. So I got up, took a shower, shoved my wallet in my pocket, and I headed to McDonald's for me some breakfast. When I stepped up there and I ordered breakfast, it came, and I whipped my wallet out and opened it up, and that baby was empty. I did not have $1 to my name. So I gave him the food back, went to the racetrack, and I practiced. And I practiced, and I practiced, and I moved lead, and I changed springs. I'm slow, not fast enough, not fast enough, not fast enough. I changed everything on the chassis you can imagine. Moving lead, slinging stuff. And practice is now over. And I put it up on 4 jack stands. And I put this setup back exactly the way I unloaded the car. And I walked over to Goodyear with 4 wheels. And I had them mount me a set of Goodyears. Got them done in time for qualifying, rolled them over there, had them all staggered up. And I rolled out on the qualifying line. I've never made a lap on Goodyears, ever. And rolled out on the racetrack, broke the track record, set on the pole. Bought another set for the race on credit. And of course, we went on to win the race, and I won enough money to pay my tire bill. And it was time. That was the time, I had to make the switch. Unfortunately, I had to buy tires the rest of the year, but we were having such a great year. It didn't really matter. So we made that work. But that was a hell of a weekend. I'm still proud as I could be of putting the setup back like it was when we unloaded, because that was my best guess of what we needed, and bolting 4 tires on it that I'd never been on, and rolling out on the back stretch and driving off into 3 hard, not knowing what I had and assessing what I had in 3 and turn 4, and and being able to lay down a lap that was good enough to sit on the pole. So
Jackson takes, and it's ball one.
we had one hell of a year. It was absolutely unbelievable. Everybody who was anybody had one of those cars. I'm talking about Dick Trickle. I'm talking about Rusty Wallace. I'm talking about Butch Lindley. I think Jody Ridley.
He delivers.
You know, Darrell Waltrip. Just you name them. I mean, the greatest racers ever had to buy one of those cars. Probably outside of IROC racing, the greatest pride that I've ever experienced in my racing career was that race car that we built and developed and turned short track asphalt racing totally upside down. Everybody had to have one of those race cars, and it was really cool to be a part of. And Ray Dillon was really, really good for me. He was just an old, to me, I mean, here's how I visualize Ray Dillon: just an old farmer. Did very crude work. He was, but the stuff he built was really crude prior to building this race car. And that's why I was like, dude, you've got to have a surface plate, you've got to build a jig, and this shit's got to be nice. And he started, and he did all that. And he conformed and started building, pretty nice race cars. I would take them and make them really nice, but, they were nice enough race cars. Structurally were fantastic. I can't give him enough credit for pushing me to elevate, pushing me and elevating me. He made me better because he was so freaking smart. He was really, he really helped me be a better racer because he was so smart about. And I didn't have the confidence in myself to venture out into that, and he did. And so he helped give me confidence and push me to elevate my game way beyond anything that I'd ever dreamed of. So it was a magical year, and it kind of led. Of course, we won the ASA championship again. So that's 3 years in a row, 78, 79, and 80. We're getting publicity like you wouldn't believe. And it's time now. I've done everything that I can do. It's time for me to go NASCAR racing. And so in order for me to dip my toe into it, I started making my plans toward the end of 1980. And my plan was for 81 to build a cup car. I had found a guy that would do the same deal as Ray Dillon. He would pay the bills for assembling the car, and I would be the point guy on how it was assembled, who worked on it, how it was all done. He just, I didn't have to write a check for all the parts and pieces that went on the race car. And his name was Bud Reeder, so I found him, and so started making plans to build my own cup car in the image of my ASA car. My short track car was going to use everything that I had learned and knew and understood to build a cup car, as opposed to using any knowledge whatsoever of Southern racing and NASCAR racing. In other words, I'd never been in the pits of a NASCAR race. I'd never seen anybody's cup cars up close. I'd never been around one, never worked one, never driven one, didn't know anybody who worked on them, nothing. I just looked at the rule book and devised a plan. And in order to retain my Rookie of the Year status, I would run 5 races, and I'd run them on short tracks where I knew that I was a badass. So I was going to do something that was very familiar to me as far as short track racing with those 5 Cup cars. Those races happened to be Nashville, 2 of them at Nashville, 1 at Martinsville, 1 at Richmond, and 1 at North Wilkesboro. And then I had an opposite plan of that for running 5 Busch races at the time, which is Xfinity races now. I would do those on super speedways and get that experience because I had no super speedway experience. And we would build that car. Was going to be Dylan was going to do that car for me. In other words, Dylan couldn't really build it, but it was going to be built. He was going to pay for all the builds. So we used a front snout, like we would use a stock Camaro front snout like we used on the Howe cars, and geometry that I was familiar with. And we use that same snout on the Cup car as well. 3-link rear suspension on that car of Dylan's. Actually Ray put that frame and cage together. And so I had that covered, and then of course I was going to have a Art-Go sort of open rules car, late model car, and an ASA car for 81. So I was going to do some ASA races, some Art-Go races, some Crown Jewel late model races, 5 Cup races, and 5 Busch races. I was going to have my hands full for 1981. I added an employee, and we're still going to do all that out of North Liberty, Indiana. So we had a lot of work to do going into the winter of 1980 to prepare for 1981.
So 1981 will be episode 23, but Mark, a couple things about 1980 to cover. And again, you got to go back to these other episodes you had. You talked about the lack of spring in ASA. That is episode 3. Also the Larry Shaw episodes, and then Dave Watson, especially Dave Watson, episode 6 and on. So if you get a chance, go back and listen to them. They add a lot of flavor to what we're talking about. 1980 also added AMSOIL. Let's talk about that quick.
Well, Dave Watson kind of played a role in that. Dave at the time was getting ready to go NASCAR racing and had been dipping his toe in that, and was, an ASA champion already. I think he won it in '77, the year I got Rookie of the Year. And so he was moving on toward NASCAR, and he and I had, been struck up a friendship, and he introduced me to them, and they came on board, which was the first sponsor that I'd ever gotten that I got a check from, actually got some money from. And so that was a big deal for me. Prior to that, everything that made my program work was, was manufacturers. I was on the deal for just about everything. Just about everything you could use on the race car, I was on a deal. And that made my program work. The big hole that I had in my program was my engine program. That was the one thing that was going to really put a limit or a damper on what I might be able to do, was having to pay an engine bill. So having AMSOIL come on board was important. It wasn't as much money as I wanted or needed by any means, but it was the first time I ever got a check, so I was thrilled to have it. But it was it probably would cover 3/4 of what my engine bill was for an engine with Baker, just to kind of put it in perspective. So looking into 81, I had more to do than just landing AMSOIL. I had to figure my engine program out. And after 1980, owning.
He hits a chopper
you know,
out to third.
man, we just owned
his
them.
glove.
Any pieces left that I wasn't on the deal for was certainly going to be easy to make the deals for 81.
So after 1980, we went into 81. Let's talk about Dillon Enterprises. These cars, all the heavy hitters had them. It was the car to have. What happened after 1980 to Dillon Enterprises and that chassis?
Oh, he continued on after I went into 81, and they were really hitting their heyday in 81. And then in 82, I went off NASCAR racing. I moved to North Carolina and went NASCAR racing and didn't run any late models. So they continued forward. Rusty Wallace, ran their car. Everybody had their cars. Ballou got a car in the 80s. And so they flourished through the 80s, all through the 80s. They flourished.
1981, we're going to get into next. That's the start of the NASCAR career and all the other racing that we were doing. And then we get into some pretty hard years after that. Let's just kind of give people a snapshot of what's going to happen over the next couple episodes.
Well, 81 is fun because we do some more absolutely phenomenal things. Probably the last year of my career to do things that shouldn't be able to be done. And so 81 is absolutely breathtaking, the stuff that we did with the lack of knowledge that I had of NASCAR and not hiring anybody who had any NASCAR experience. You got to know, we're used to running and winning ASA races, 200, 300, and 400 lap races, pit stop races. I got a damn good pit crew. I know how to run these long races and all that stuff. So I'm well prepared to go NASCAR racing. Rex Robbins with ASA latched onto me the first year that we ran for the championship and started mentoring me and using me to help him promote his series and our series through media, print, and doing TV interviews and stuff. And so, I'd had some really great grooming for what was about to happen in NASCAR for my career. And so 81's an amazing year. And then 82 will be really fun because it is when I tripped and failed. And I fell down and pretty much was the beginning of the end of my racing career. And that all sort of came together in 83, and I did lose my entire racing career. And then 84, 5, and 6, we'll discuss my building my career back from scratch, and then the struggles through 87, and then 88 will be my first year with Jack. 89 will be an interesting year with Jack. 90 will be an amazing year with Jack and everything. Then after that, I won't have very much of interest, I don't feel, until we get to 05, when I'm supposed to end my racing for championships in Cup, and a series of events changes that. And then in 06, the next year, a series of events change it again. And then in 07, I do what I said. I go back to a limited schedule. I do that in 08, 07, 08. And then I have my last big hurrah in 09. And then we had a little fun the last few years. And then I finally close the door and walk away into the sunset.
I think one thing to point out, and you've said this multiple times, but you get this question all the time if you ever want to strap back in, and you're very adamant about you're done.
I don't have any interest in it. I will absolutely don't have any interest in driving anything fast, go-kart or anything else, side-by-side or anything else. I'm done. You don't understand. I didn't drive and I didn't race for fun. I raced to win. And that's the only, I associate it 100% with pressure, extreme hard work, and more pressure. That's what it is. It wasn't about having fun. And so when I think about it now, it's like, dude, I don't have any pressure and I love it. And I don't drive fast. Why would I drive fast? I wouldn't be as good at it as I used to be. I don't have any desire to race cars. Now I will say this series, I can't remember everything. There are a lot of cool things that happen through these years that I'm doing in podcasts that I forget to include. One of the big deals was the Snowball Derby in 1978. We'd won our first championship, and we go to the Snowball after that's over in December, and we should have won we damn near won the Snowball Derby. I don't say we should have. We damn near did. I was on Firestones, and I 46s was the compound that you ran on the right, 51s on the left, and I scuffed a set of 51s for the right to put on after the last pit stop, and bolted those things on, and we're leading the race. And all of a sudden, Dave Mater III starts catching me, and with 5 laps to go, he caught me, passed me, and won the race. And I just thought I got beat. And when I got the car back home to Arkansas and got ready to unstrap that right rear tire from the trailer, I saw that the right rear tire was blistered. So I believe that we would have had a good shot to win that race if I'd have just made the choice of sticking with the 46s. But the 51s were softer and a little bit faster, and that's all part of it. Just there's a lot of amazing stories like that, and a lot of things that I forget to tell. There's stories about 1980 that should be in this podcast. I can't remember right now. I'll remember later, and I may come back to them or whatever. But 1980 was an incredible year. The only other year that was so incredible would be 81, and it was probably tops 1980, and it probably is the most incredible year of my career, only slightly rivaled by 2009. I'd have to say 81 was number one in my career, and probably 09 would be my second most absolutely amazing year of my career.
So once again, race fans, make sure to head back on markmartinpod.com or on any of the podcast players and listen to some of these older episodes. Get some more of this flavor. Mark, when you talk to some of these other folks that we've interviewed in the past, they bring up stuff that you didn't remember. You bring up stuff they didn't remember, and it turns into a big old party.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's fun. And we're walking through these, sort of briefly and hitting the high spots of the things that I can remember, but there'll always be stories from every year that I don't think of to include in the podcast. So, for the people that are interested, there's a lot of interesting stuff that goes through all of them. So it's good times. I'm having fun putting this together, and it will sort of be around when I'm gone. We'll have this stuff around for people, the next generation, to listen to.
Now, one thing we want to touch on before the episode is done, and a question that I had, and you touched on this briefly. You had a very close relationship with Rusty Walls, good buddies. Talk about that. You guys ran up and down, the highways and the races. Talk about your relationship with Rusty.
Yeah, Rusty and I were good friends, good competitors. We raced our guts out, but we were friends before the race, and we were friends after the race. On the racetrack, we raced with respect, and we never, ever, we started racing each other when we were teenagers, and we just didn't have a jealousy problem or envious problem. I made it to NASCAR really early, and then failed, and then he made it to NASCAR while I was floundering, rebuilding my career, and then eventually we wound up back in NASCAR together, and we raced hard for a lifetime, and we never, ever, ever had a problem. There's 2 incidents that we had over the years. One which I lost it on the inside of him and wiped him out. And when he got out and got interviewed, he said, "I don't know what happened, but I know Mark doesn't race like that, so I don't know." And, because he knew that I wouldn't do something like that. And then we had a deal in Talladega where he said on the radio, he told his spotter, told my spotter, he said he would go with me wherever I went at Talladega. So I went, and he didn't.
Going into the bottom of the 8th, the game's tied at 3.
It's funny to hear him tell the story, because he says, "You got out of the car, walked straight up to me, put your finger in my face, and said, 'I'm really disappointed in you.'"
The corners are
and
the line.
Rusty says that was worse than whipping my ass. That was the worst thing that you could have ever said to me, And that's the extent of our getting crossways over the course of whatever it was, 20, 30 years of racing. 30 years probably.
So once again, fans, we're going to get to that and many more upcoming here on the Mark Martin Podcast. But this has been episode 22, 1980. Again, hit us up, markmartinpod.com, at markmartinpod on social media and all of your podcast players. Hit that 5-star rating. But we're going to get to you in 1981 next on the Mark Martin Podcast.
Thank you for subscribing and listening to the Mark Martin Podcast. Remember to give us a 5-star rating in your app store. Connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Mark Martin POD. The Mark Martin Podcast is a production of the Accelerated Podcast Network.
It's all still out there. The tranquility of a forest road, the grandeur of an alpine pass, that little thrill as gravity pulls you through a turn. Find inspiration wherever you go in a Mazda CUV. Take advantage of extraordinary offers during Mazda's Rediscover the Road event. Arrange your test drive today and feel confident knowing that Mazda has more IIHS Top Safety Pick Plus models than any automaker as of June 2020. Mazda. Feel alive.
Race fans, it's time to buckle in and listen to the fastest hour in racing radio. Your driver is a multi-time NASCAR winner and Hall of Famer Mark Martin. We cover racing, grassroots, history, we bench race, we talk life, and most importantly, we smash the loud pedal. It's time to turn some laps on the Mark Martin Podcast.
Episode 21 of the Mark Martin Podcast, and the year is going to be 1979. Before we get to it, make sure to hit up markmartinpod.com to listen to all the episodes, at markmartinpod on all of the social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And also, make sure to hit us up on all of the different podcast players. Make sure to give us that 5-star rating, subscribe, and catch all of these awesome podcasts chronicling Mark Martin's career. But episode 21, we're going to head into 1979. But Mark, you have a story about 1977 that you wanted to flip back to before we get started on 1979.
Yeah, well, I'll start out with hauler stuff anyway for 79. So that's a big story each of these years, and I have forgotten one of our crazy episodes. If you remember back to 77, that's when we finally got the, the evolution from the Chevy pickup to the double cab 4-door to the dually ramp truck, and then the first 3 years, and then our 4th year in '77. That's when we had my dad added the double stick transmission duplex, and we didn't have enough brakes. Now we've got all this horsepower, this massive engine, 454, all tricked out and everything, and got the gears, so we got lots of speed, but we can't stop. And so somehow or another, Troy Lynn Jeffries figured out how to get the brake boosters added to this thing, so we could also get it slowed down. Or my dad, I never drove it. My dad always drove. And it seemed like, and then we built that little trailer, probably 8x10 or 8x8 trailer that we pulled behind it, little U-Haul like trailer that had the spare. We had a spare had to carry a spare engine, toolbox, and parts and pieces, and a 55-gallon drum of fuel, and all those kinds of things, because we were starting to do longer races, and we had to have all that stuff. So we built this little trailer to tow behind the hauler, and filled it up with race engines and toolbox and all this stuff. And it seemed like every time we left to go, we raced Friday night a lot. We raced Friday night at Springfield, Missouri, 200-mile trip, and then spend the night and go to Fort Smith on Saturday night. Race Saturday night at Fort Smith, Arkansas, Tri-State Speedway. Both are asphalt. So we
in the air foul, but there's room to make
seemed like this was early in the season, and leading up to the middle of the season. And every time we left, the race shop was right next to the trucking company. And every time we left, my dad was late. He was late because, he was dispatching and working in the office and everything. And he was always mad. And I mean always mad. He had a terrible temper, and was a scary dude when he was pissed. And he was always late. We were all sitting in the truck waiting on him, and he'd get out there to the truck finally, and we would leave, and we would go to Springfield in 3 hours. It was a 2-lane road almost all the way, and we'd go 200 miles. We'd make it in 3 hours sharp. It was insane. The way he drove. He believed in passing cars when you caught them, no matter what, where hills, curves, whatever. It was really, for most people that rode with us, it was fairly frightening, but that's what we did. So there was a big 2-day show in Fort Smith. It was an ASA race, actually, I think, and so we left late for that on Friday. It was a Friday, Saturday night show. We left late on Friday, and didn't get 30 miles from home. And we caught a Volkswagen going about 50 miles an hour around a curve. And Dad never even checked up, just whipped out the passing. And when he whipped out the passing, here comes a dump truck head on. So he whipped back in, and obviously wasn't going to be able to not hit the Volkswagen, so he ditched it. And we went through the ditch, and it was a hell of a rough ride through that ditch and gully and everything. We got stopped, and scared us pretty good. And we got stopped, and Larry Shaw said, and we had this guy, Claude Reed, that used to help us too. He was a trucker that worked for my dad. And Claude, he seemed like he would, if you said, boy, it sure is sunny today, he'd say, no, it's dark. It seemed like he was always arguing. So we come to a stop, in this ditch, all happy to be alive. And Shaw says, boy, I bet that trailer went for a ride back there. And Claude Reed said, no, it ain't back there. We got out of the truck, and that trailer had broke off at the tongue, stuck in the ground, and went end over end over end. And out there in the woods, there was a racing engine, a barrel of busted fuel, a 9/16 wrench here, screwdriver there. The tools were scattered everywhere, spare parts. You know, it was just a disaster. And I was pissed. You know, it was messing my racing program up for all this ridiculous stuff. So anyway, we got the hauler itself back out on the road. And so the rest of us left and went on to Fort Smith to get ready to practice and qualify. And my dad had somebody come and pick him up. And he loaded up all the parts and pieces out of the woods and everything, got everything loaded up in some other truck and met us up there the next day with everything. So that was the kind of road trips that we took in '77. They would scare most people.
How did you? I mean, with an accident like that, how did you guys recover? Go and pick up the pieces, and how did you recover from that?
Well, my dad picked up the pieces. He stayed back and picked up the pieces and gathered everything up and came the next day. But we just went on. We went on and qualified for the race. We didn't need the spare parts and stuff. We had enough stuff to get us through qualifying on the rig, and we got through qualifying. And it was a 200 lapper. Dad got there the next day with all the stuff, and the fuel and everything, gas cans and everything. And I believe we won that race. Certainly believe we won that race, that 200 lapper. It was a big deal. It was a big race and a big deal for us. But that was the kind of trips we made. So fast forward, of course, I have the next year following '77. I have, the podcast for '78. And now we're going to talk about 1979. Well, in '78, I had that Ford Cube van and that real heavy trailer. We blew 3 motors up in that Ford Cube van, so wasn't going to do that anymore. So Rusty had a step van, bread truck. He called the Hilton because it had a bunk in it and a sofa behind the driver's seat. And it worked out really, really good. It pulled a trailer and then had all the spare parts in the back side of that step van. So I ordered a new step van with a 454 in it for the '79 season, and was pretty excited about tricking that out. Put a sleeper sofa right behind the driver's seats, and then built a bunk up above the sofa, and was getting that truck all ready. And of course we went and got us another new Howe chassis to build a new Howe car. But in '78, as you recall, I went down to New Smyrna and raced for the championship and won the Speed Weeks, won the World Series of Asphalt Racing. And it didn't pay any money. It cost us a lot of money to go do that. And I was racing on basically pretty much winnings. We got a lot of free stuff. We won the championship in '78. So, we were on a tire deal. We had a reasonable engine deal, although it cost money. We got just about all the parts. Everything that we used on the car was free. So I kind of operated the operation off the winnings. And my dad, bought some of the trick parts and, like the hauler and a few of the things like that. So I wasn't going to waste the money to do New Smyrna in '79. So my plan was to go down there and go to the Oval Track Trade Show, which was at Daytona during Speed Weeks back then. Now it's kind of the PRI show in Indy, but I was going to go to the trade show and, hustle up more deals, more free stuff. And while I was down there, Duke Southard had the Southard School of Auto Racing, which was a driving school that I had actually attended in the spring of '76 when I was moving up to late models from the 6-cylinder division. And so I knew